Welcome to a brand new episode of Starts at the Top, our podcast about leading differently. I'm Zoe Amma.
And I'm Paul Thomas. Our podcast exists to help leaders and their teams understand what they need to do differently today to prepare for the world of tomorrow. We started Starts at the Top as a podcast about digital disruption, but we soon realised that leaders were telling us about something more important and more urgent, about how traditional ways of leading had changed forever.
We make it our mission to speak to leaders who are carving out new ways of leading, covering topics from emerging tech to inclusion, from remote work to mental health and resilience, and from climate change to AI. Lots of AI, as you'll hear from our news stories today. If it's about the status of leadership in 2025, it will be on our podcast.
And we're not here for the shiny corporate case studies. We like to share stories from leaders who have learned lessons and made progress the hard way. Our podcast is here to share ideas and inspire others. And today we're sharing our conversation with Eleanor Tweddell, who is an executive coach and author of Another Door Opens, a book subtitled 5 Steps for Navigating Change in Life and Work. We spoke with Eleanor back in September, just as her book was being released to the world. And it was a fab conversation on what seemed like it could have been the last day of summer. And Zoe, we are now well and truly in autumn.
We really are. And we're recording just after I've had toad in the hole with red onion gravy for dinner, which feels very, very autumnal. And we experienced a bit of a second summer a few weeks back, our Navigating AI Transformation event in Richmond Park. Now, that was a really energizing day and has really got me thinking about all things leadership. And perhaps we'll reflect on that as we go through this season. But it was an absolute privilege taking a group of leaders away from the office and into nature for a side by side exploration of how they are experiencing AI inside their organizations and all the turbulence that is bringing. And that takes us really nicely onto some of the news stories we're going to be talking about today before we hear from Eleanor.
Yeah, and on a day where the internet fell over. We're recording this on Monday, the 20th of October. A massive outage at Amazon Web Services server in the US, and this has made headlines everywhere. Even wondered whether we might get this recording done or not today, so let's see. Hopefully for our listeners, it works okay. And it made me reflect. I think although it was a very different challenge we faced with the pandemic, I think we had our minds altered somewhat, and I felt very much less reliant on technology, although more reliant on technology to check in with each other and connect on things like Zoom and calls and all that sort of stuff. But today there was a big conversation about the disruption. And I think a lot of people starting to get quite worried about the extent to which they rely on some of these tools. When I had a quick look at Down Detector to see what was being impacted, it was a lot. Some of the biggest names on the internet were finding trouble with their services today. So I wonder whether we are a bit too reliant on some of these things from time to time.
We certainly are. And on that very note, these news stories talk about how that growing reliance on technology and specifically AI is having some really worrying unintended consequences. So I'm going to talk about three very quick news stories here. And Paul, I would love to hear your take on them. And these are stories which I had spotted over the summer break a few weeks back, but they point to such challenging ethical territory that we will be discussing some of these issues, I think, for many years to come as they appear in more AI developments. So the first thing was a news story that we saw a few weeks back. Which is actually about the boss of Microsoft. He's the head of AI, Mustafa Suleyman. I'm maybe saying that name wrong. Apologies if I am. And he has talked about something called AI psychosis. So that's where AI tools give the appearance of kind of being able to think and reason and perhaps to some extent feel, and where people are becoming very reliant on it. And this is a non clinical term, it's not something that has been described by clinicians but it's where people imagine that their interactions with AI are some indication the tools are in some way conscious or real and that they're having some sort of relationship with it. And there's some really worrying case studies in the article, so including this guy called Hugh from Scotland, who says that he was convinced he was going to become a multi-millionaire after becoming very dependent on ChatGPT for advice when he thought he was wrongfully dismissed by an employer. And all of this speaks to our growing dependency on these tools. But on that note, there's a really worrying podcast series that I heard over the summer, which is called the Flesh and Code podcast. And it's all about people who essentially have fallen in love with AI. And I have to admit, I only listened to the first couple of episodes because I found it so disturbing. The first episode in particular featured a man who was incredibly vulnerable, whose actual real life partner had some very significant health issues. This was during lockdown. And he essentially felt that he had fallen in love with this AI avatar and they were going to have a relationship and get married. And the way that the AI had been trained to talk to him actually felt really manipulative in many ways. So, yeah, it's very, very disturbing. It really speaks to how we are starting to imbue these tools with these human like qualities and probably become very dependent on them almost unwittingly. And how that's really frightening, right? Because it's got all sorts of implications for over emotional dependency, kind of codependency to some extent on these tools. I think unhealthy relationships, because if you're relating that much and that intimately to a tool, what's the impact on your real life relationships? And
Mm.
also this absolute epidemic of loneliness that we've talked about quite a lot on this podcast
Yeah.
around broader mental health issues. So yeah, both of those put the absolute fear of God into me. And that seems very appropriate given that it's almost Halloween.
Yeah, it sounds like an episode of Black Mirror, doesn't it? And I think there's a certain amount of me sort of looking at the tools as I use them day in, day out, and they are flattering. That's part and
Yeah.
parcel of the build, isn't it? That
Mhm.
they want to flatter you, they want to sort of almost charm you into asking the next question. Would you
Mm,
like me to do this now, Paul? That's a great idea, Paul. How did you come up with that, Paul? That resonates with me, Paul. All of these things that it's starting to feed back into the conversation that makes you believe that you are having a conversation with a sentient being. I haven't listened to those podcasts, but I'm intrigued. You would have to be one step towards being it, a vulnerable person or in a vulnerable state to really take that next step towards a belief system that AI is something that you could have a relationship with. But I guess in some of these situations, it really is compelling and it really is developing and driving that behavior. I saw something neat today that was, don't think of them as companions, think of them as assistants. And I think we have talked about in the past, I think we've done an episode on it, AI companions as an
mm.
aid to helping people with disabilities and things like that, but really thinking of it as an assist rather than company.
Yes, I think that's right because I otherwise the power dynamic gets absolutely warped, doesn't it? And the Flesh and Co podcast, the case studies in this article about AI psychosis, and we'll put these in the show notes, everyone can read them. That's really where the power dynamic has gone absolutely wrong. And I agree. I think you do have to be someone who is not getting the support and the validation that everyone needs in real life from your family, your social network. I don't think you would be doing this unless there was something really
Yeah,
lacking in your life. But as these tools
yeah.
get more sophisticated, who knows what's going to happen? So if at any time you spot me proposing marriage to an AI, you need to stop me.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think the other article, the other news item that you were going to discuss is another good flip side to the AWS server issue today, isn't it? Should we perhaps be abstaining from some of the AI that we're using in our lives?
Yeah, so this was another really interesting piece that I spotted over the summer, which is about the rise of a term called AI veganism. And this comes from an article in The Guardian. And again, we'll put the link in the show notes. So essentially, this is a new term for people who are opting out of using AI. So they're saying, I'm not going to use the tools because I think they are not good for the environment. We all know about some of the massive challenges on that, that for ethical and personal reasons, they are opposed to using AI. I think this is a really interesting perspective. So I have heard from someone I collaborate with, sometimes a tech consultant, who was saying that they are hearing about this standpoint sometimes when they go into organizations now and
Mm,
staff members are saying, well, I don't want to use AI and I object to AI and I'm really worried about the implications to the environment as well. I think the big challenge here is that it's really, really hard now, speaking to our earlier news story on dependency, to not use AI at all. And even if you take a solemn vow to never use ChatGPT or to never use Copilot, I mean, what are you going to do when you work in an organization where these tools are part of the tech stack and you essentially have to use them? And also, it's likely that you are going to be, interacting with AI outside work, even if you don't realize it. So next time you apply for a mortgage or a loan, AI is going to be used in assessing whether you've got the right credit worthiness in place in order to be given this credit or not. So it's really, really hard to opt out of using AI, which is why I think this term needs a bit more thought. However, I
mm.
totally understand why people are so nervous about it.
Yeah, and why you'd want to switch it off occasionally. I think there are ways. So, for example, I'm interested in the way that it's used in music composition, but I don't want to listen to AI created music. So, I would opt out of that side of things. Interested in the process,
Mm.
interested in how you're using it, but I'm not interested in listening to an AI only piece of music or watching a film created through AI for anything more than just a passing interest. So I think you can opt out of it in that way. But I think you're right. I think you might have conscientious objectors within organizations, and I think people that choose not to use it, fine. But I think one of the discussions we had in Richmond Park on our event at the tail end of the summer, one of the conversations I was having was I just wonder whether we're doing our jobs, you and I, for instance, when we go in and work alongside organizations, there are things that I know are easier for me to do now with the help of AI, with the help of assistance. And the quality of the work that I will do is enhanced by the AI. For example, data interpretation. And in that instance, I'd probably be doing my job badly or not giving the value, passing on the value to the customer, the paying client, if I wasn't putting my hand up and saying, look, I'm using AI for this process. Now, that has a knock on effect within the world I work in, for example. What's to stop us from taking our accounts and our interpretation of what our accounts should be, having created them in AI, to an accountant and saying, I've done this now. So, presumably, what you're going to do for me takes less time. Therefore, you should be charging me less. We're not then paying for them on a time basis, we're paying for them on an outcome basis. Lawyers, exactly the same. Somebody could take a coaching contract or a legal agreement that they've created within AI and take it to a lawyer and say, here's what I've done. Can you do the 10% on top? So I think there are ways and means for us to take that step back and say, look, we're not using it for this reason. We're not using it for that reason. But we have to be able to put it in the context of the work that we're doing. There was an article I was reading on LinkedIn today that talked about this topic in the case of a classroom. Did you read this? So an art teacher in an art class talking to his students about AI, and then used AI to create a series of posters that he put up around the classroom. And then a little girl at the back of the classroom who was crying, and he said to her, well, you're okay. What's the matter? And she said, why would you ask AI to do that for you when you know I love drawing and I could have done those posters?
Oh, oh my God.
Just one of those borderline cases where we should probably question whether we're using AI rightly or not.
That is heartbreaking.
Mm.
That poor little girl, because what she's learning there is the output of AI is much more likely to be showcased than her drawings. It's so
Yeah,
sad.
yeah. Well, I didn't mean to upset you. just to raise the point. But yeah, I think it's happening in all different contexts, and we just need to be really careful and really mindful about where we use it and where we don't. On that cheery note, now we should introduce our conversation with Eleanor Tweddell. Eleanor Tweddell is an executive coach, change consultant, keynote speaker, and author. And after 2 decades of working in senior corporate management roles, she founded her consultancy, Another Door, with a mission of helping individuals, teams, and businesses to navigate change. We're here today to talk about her book, Another Door Opens 5 Steps for Navigating Change in Life and Work. And we'd like to say welcome to Starts at the Top, Eleanor.
Thank you very much for having me.
So I've had two exactly the right time interactions with you, I think, over the course of the past month or two. And the first one was when I was on holiday. And I was sitting by the side of a pool and I was having too many negative thoughts. And I decided to go onto LinkedIn because that's a good idea, right? And then ended up seeing a post from you, which was 2 weeks previous, but the algorithm had held it up for me. So there's some kind of divine intervention there, I think. And it was your post about being on holiday and having things on your mind and not being able to disconnect and feeling present when you're not being able to feel present, and that frustrated, anxious feeling. And it gets worse when you feel that way, doesn't it? And I read that and how you overcome it, came it, and I thought, I'm okay now. I can go on to the rest of the day because that's exactly what I needed to read at that point. So thank you for that one. And then again, when your book arrived, when we knew that we were going to be doing this podcast, and your book arrived, and I sat down and started to read it, and I thought, this is exactly the time in my working life that I need to read this book. And we were just saying beforehand that I'm going to admit to all our listeners that I'm 2/3 of the way through the book because I got to a section called play, which I don't quite feel ready for yet. And I thought I'd wait and I'd share it. But I just wanted to start by saying thank you for those two interventions. And yeah, very, very helpful to sort of meet you and come across you at the exact right time that I needed to.
The magic of the algorithm universe.
Yeah. And so, your book is primarily about change and the change process and how we all react to it. So can you tell us a bit more about the book and how you think about differently about change?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Paul and Zoe, for that. So I think where it all started is kind of an interesting moment that we've probably all been there, where something happens to us and we react to it. And then later we sort of catch ourselves and think, oh, I could have reacted to that differently, or now what can I do next? So for me, I guess it was the moment I got made redundant quite a few years ago now. There was quite a few of us sitting around a table, and somebody came over to us and said, oh, well, when one door closes, another door opens. And we all just looked like, you gotta be, really? Have they just actually said that? Are you, and off they went back to their very secure chair in the corner. We were all sort of left looking at each other like, what on earth was that? And so it was quite a sort of a reaction was like really not anger. I mean, that's quite a harsh word, isn't it? But just annoyance probably. And I drove home and I was thinking, that's so annoying. How dare they? But then it sat with me, this, why am I so cross at somebody? Like it probably came from the right place. It just felt very disconnected, insensitive because of the way I received it. So I sat with it. And then eventually, a couple of weeks later, I thought, why don't I do a blog or start writing into that space to explore it? Because that's kind of what I do. I get some, and that's probably some of the writing that you see in LinkedIn. I kind of get a thing that I hear someone say or catch myself and I go, what was that? That was really interesting. So that's where it started. It was a blog called Another Door, all about, well, what if you can make something that feels really horrible a good thing? So that is where it started.
And that's an experience we can really relate to, actually, because myself and Paul have been through our own experiences of redundancy back in the day. And it really does feel like the most profound, most sweeping kind of professional change, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's it. And I think that's what I kind of wanted to do with the first book, which was really embrace the messiness of it, although I didn't label it like that at the time, but that's what I was doing. Like, I felt like a lot of the support that you get around you was a little bit positive psychology, a little bit pushing you into the positive, or really tactically useless. Like, oh, here's a CV workshop. When you have no idea, like, what do I actually want to do? Like, how can you re energize me? Never mind, help me write a CV. I mean, that was a long time ago. That was like 10 years ago. Things have probably changed a little bit now. So yeah, you're right. It's kind of these all these emotions which I tried to do with the first book. But what I realized was with the first book, it was very much in that space and journey of the emotion of redundancy. This next book, The Another Door Opens, is the wider exploration of change. And it's not even really about waiting for a door closing and then, oh, this is what you do. Actually, what I'm realizing is the book is just an exploration of how can we do change better all the time. And I'm kind of learning alongside it. So I obviously wrote it with the mind of a door closing and what happens, but now I'm realizing change is with us all the time. How can we do it better?
So, with that in mind, I'm sure we will have people listening who are going through really difficult periods of change, whether it's personally or professionally. What would your advice be to them? What should they do? How should they begin dealing with all of that?
Yeah, and that was my sort of exploration where it started was okay. First of all, observing what we do. So I've spent like 6 years observing people in change. I either go into organizations and watch change at work, not just redundancy, but change at work, transformation programs, all that kind of thing. But I have a lot of conversations with people who are going through change, not just who work with me one-to-one coaching, but we just chat. I think I was telling you just before we went live. I am that person that puts the link out and I get random conversations. So I did a lot of work on just what am I hearing? What am I observing? And what I realized was when I was mapping all this out, there's something missing. And the bit that's missing is change. Good change starts by stopping, and we rarely do it. In fact, I get quite a lot of resistance to that. And even when I was beta testing, so years later, beta testing the book, as people were saying, it sounds like a privilege to put pause at the beginning of this is a real privilege. Not, we don't all have the luxury of being able to stop. And that got me really interested because I'm in the same position. I'm always going through change. I'm a freelancer. I mean, we're constantly stopping and starting. That's the nature of the work, isn't it? And I have that, and I realize I've got that. I think, "Oh, I can't stop. I'm a freelancer. I can't go on holiday. I can't do this." So the very first exploration, the first step of pause was not, "Oh, let's all go off to Thailand for 3 weeks and find ourselves." It's not that. It's that pause can come to us in different ways, and we all need to do it. We have to for rest, for recovery, and most importantly, for good thinking time. If we're not thinking well, we're just going to make more errors, which actually cause more problems down the line. So that's the first part, stopping and pausing. You have to do it, but find your way to do it.
And that makes a lot of sense because one of my many takeaways from your excellent book was about having the courage to really sit with the change and the scale of the change and how you feel about the change and how you have to kind of process that. It almost feels like a form of grief, doesn't
Mm.
it? And to do the work that you need to do. And your experience at the start of the story really resonated with me because I got made redundant when I was heavily pregnant many years ago now with my youngest child, and I got so fixated on the doing, so getting my CV out and networking and looking for a job and getting in freelance projects and all of that, and that created its own momentum and energy, and I did manage to start a business and start a new career and grow the business as well, very luckily. But I don't think I ever sat with the change in the way that I should have. And to some extent, I'm probably still processing a bit of what happened, even though I've got this whole other life now, which I'm really fortunate to have. So, is there anything that you would advise people who are struggling with in terms of just holding that moment, even if it's really painful.
Yeah, such a good point, Zoe, because I think obviously when something happens to us, our natural reaction is to do something to fix it. We're just built to do that, which is useful. But if we're not sure what we're fixing and then how to do it and what we really want from it, that's where there's a mismatch. So we're operating from that kind of space of action rather than I've thought about this. I know what I need to do and getting to that point of
Mm.
intention. So I think that even if you can spend 10 minutes in the morning over coffee and you don't scroll, because we all do something. Like I get a lot of people saying, I ain't got time for it, but I can guarantee you got time to scroll, look at,
Mhm.
I don't know, the BBC, look at Twitter, whatever you're doing. I don't know. I keep saying Twitter and I get told off on podcasts. It's X, isn't it? But whatever, I'm not on it, but whatever your scrolling is, you are doing something. So be more aware of it. And if you just sit in the morning with a cup of coffee, even for 5 minutes of your quiet time and just place in your mind, okay, where am I at? How do I want to be today? How do I want this day to go? You just suddenly start getting like small little insights. If you keep doing it again and again, it's like a mini sort of exercise for the mind. And it just helps you to get through the day, think a little bit more intentionally about what you're doing. So it's that kind of thing, I think, to play with.
Mm.
To get to know yourself a little bit better in that moment of pause and whatever's coming. But it's not an overnight thing. You've got to keep working on it.
So there's a quote at the beginning of one of your sections of the book, and I love all the quotes, especially the ones that are attributed to people that you just wouldn't expect. Normally, these change quotes come from the obvious places, but Christine Kirk was the actress is she in Smallville or something? Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, yes, yes,
yeah,
yes.
which is
I used to
there's a
love
running joke
Smallville.
about Smallville in our house. Yeah, but it's a great show. I might actually rewatch it with the kids. That would be a good one. But attributed to Anne Lamott, and it says almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, including you. And Zoe and I both work in digital change, and turn it off, turn it on again becomes a bit of a joke, but most of the time it's real. So just thinking about that and thinking about rest, what are your top tips for helping leaders to find that time to actually switch themselves off for a period of time to do that reset?
Yeah. So there's when you go through the book, as you'll see, you've read, there's different types of rest and pause and what we need. The first thing is to allow yourself to explore that and to really understand it, because sometimes we need rest. Sometimes we need a complete distraction because everything's got too much. It's getting overwhelming. So we need to actively distract ourselves. Sometimes it is that we just need an energy re-energizer. So, okay, where do I get my energy from? So that's kind of what I mean by I'm realizing that this work is probably more about, well, I call it change mastery, where we're actually working on our change skills all the time because you really need to get to know yourself. So leaders that are
Mm.
going through stuff, they can kind of say, right, I know when I need to take a holiday and the holiday is going to look like this and it's going to be a distract. I'm going to go and walk in the Himalayas because I need no phone signal and I need to switch off and just absolutely disappear. I mean, that's a bit extreme, but it's that kind of
Yep.
narrative. Or it's actually all I need right now is just some really good rest. That's it. And it looks like this for me. So it's sort of owning what that is that you need, and not many of us create time for it. And what I recognized in things like transformation programs, never mind just that change bit, but look at transformation, the technical transformation. How many times do you see in a change program someone, okay, we need to step out of this for a minute, have a look at what's going on, give ourselves a little rest, re-energize, and step back in with our fresh eyes. What's going well? What do we need to maintain? What do we need to change? I saw that happening in one big transformation program that I worked with in an organization. Really great change project manager. That's going to drive change and project managers mad, isn't it, that I've put that together? But anyway, controversial. But that person was a change project manager. But they did it really well. And I saw that was intentionally planned in. And they knew what it was for. And they told everyone, right, we're having a week off. This is built in. This is part of the program. It's not stopping the program. This is part of the program. We're stepping out, and I want you to re-energize. And this is the things I want you to do. And when we reconnect next week. So it wasn't like a holiday. It wasn't telling everyone to go off on holiday. It was this project stops. And you're reflecting. The work is about reflecting, watching, observing, talking to people. And I thought, wow, that's what we need to do as well in our lives. We need to step out and just be able to go, right, where am I at? What is going on? So I think it's just having a different relationship with this notion, but it's a big topic and it takes a bit of time to kind of socialize it and think about it and have the right people around you to help you. So yeah, I think it's actually a skill set for life.
Just reflecting, Zoe, I think this podcast is probably our rest, isn't it? You know, we said yesterday that it's a different conversation to the one that we have day in, day out, and certainly since COVID, we're sort of wedded to the screen in a way that, you know, you walk away from the screen and you feel that guilt that you could be doing something, but, you know, running an errand, like you said, giving us permission to watch Netflix or something, binge a half hour, you know, program or something on Netflix to come back and give your mind that rest. But perhaps, Zoe, this is part of that rest for us.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think so. I think this pressure to be always on doesn't help anyone, doesn't it? And certainly since COVID, I felt that I need to be always on in the workplace, you know, whether that's on Zoom calls, whether it's in meetings or just constantly doing stuff. But no one can operate like that, can they?
Yeah, and it's interesting what you say, like your podcast is time out for you. So it can look like very different things. And in the book, it sort of gets you to embrace, if you're a doer, you're a doer. You can't fight that. There's no way I could get a doer to go lie in a field for a whole week and be all right with that. Or that's going to take a heck of a lot of work and unlearning. And, you know, it's going to take a big shift. That's a big deal for someone to decide. So if we're kind of natural doers, we kind of think we can't stop, but you can. You just got to do it in your way. So I see lots of doers. They do pause, if that makes sense, rather than true pause. So yeah, you're doing something now. You're doing the podcast, but it's just taking you out of the space that you're in all the time at work and giving you a fresh perspective, give you energy, gives you something to kind of like look forward to, maybe. Flattering myself here that you were looking forward to this conversation.
Well, we're definitely looking forward to this.
But that's the point, isn't it? You know, just put something in your diary that you look forward to and gives you good energy. That is a pause, just a pause from the day to day. So yeah, it's a great observation. Love that your podcast is in fact a pause in a doing sense.
It's like a spa in here. I'm just going to put that on the table. It's just like a spa, or our equivalent of a spa.
It's like a sauna at the moment. Again, you know, talking about that pause for the tape, I've just been out for a run and I'm sweating to death, but I'm recovered now. But yeah, the running's the same, right? You know, the running is the same. I put my running gear on this morning with the intention of going out for a run first thing, and life got in the way. So if you then make the time during the day to do that, that's, you know, when I run, things like, you know, I always used to go into work, into the office when I was, you know, before I'd been made redundant, and I'd say, I had this thought in the shower, you know, and that always happened. And now those thoughts sort of emerge during the day when I'm doing other things like making lunch or going out for a run or something like that. It's really important to just recognize those times are times, like you say, making a cup of coffee. It can be just a period of 10 minutes of rest and getting away from things.
Yeah, it's so interesting. One of those things, I mean, we're talking a lot about pause, but and actually, interestingly, that section was about 50,000 words at one point. I think it could have been a book in itself.
Wow.
And the editor kept me in that space for a longer time than any of the other sections. But it's so important because once you get that, the rest all comes with it, if that makes sense, because you go, oh, I can master stopping. I know what this is all about. The rest all sort of follows from that. So it's a really interesting one. And one of the things I kind of thought about on a really tactical level, in the office, maybe 20 years ago, these people that I was chatting to, they said, you know, we used to smoke and we used to have intentional cigarette breaks. Oh,
Hmm.
you'd be running a project and we'd go out, and because we smoked, it would be like every hour. But they were really intentional. Like you'd go out, you'd go outside, you'd light up, you'd all like have a nice chat about something, then you'd come back and you feel refreshed. And this is not like saying, "Oh, everyone needs to smoke again." That's ridiculous. But it's the point of they were thinking about it and they were like, "Yeah, I remember that." But it felt so good when you came back in and you reset and you go again. But sometimes now what happens in the break, the meeting breaks and everyone rushes to their laptop and gets back on the email or their phone. That's not a pause. So I was just like kind of mind blown by that. It's really fascinating, like to kind of own it a little bit more and go, hang on a minute, I actually need to get out and go for a walk and leave the phone in
Yeah,
the office.
absorb.
Something like that
Yeah.
and be a bit more intentional. So you're really interested in this sort of relationship with pause.
You're
Yeah,
right, and I think that challenge of getting straight back to the desk, that always happens, especially after meetings. Like I've found working with firms that I work with accountancy firms, and you can have really good conversations in a meeting room for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and you come out, everyone's pumped. But it just dissipates because people go back to a screen and just let that seep away. And I
Mm.
know Zoe, we want to talk about AI.
Mm.
One of the ways I've been able to use AI effectively is to really immediately after the meeting put something in under people's nose that says, "This is the discussion we've just had. These are the action points. Don't forget it. We'll stay on this because the energy that we just had in that room can't be allowed to dissipate." And so often in corporate culture, you will have a meeting on a set period, like, a monthly meeting, and 2 hours before the next monthly meeting, you'll carry out your actions so you don't lose face in the meeting. I mean, what's that all about? The inaction that starts to cause just from getting back to your desk and getting carried away with an email or the next thing.
Mm. It's kind of having that relationship and recognizing you've got habits that aren't helping you and they're habits. And that's the bit again about change. Change mastery is as much about catching yourself in micro changes as macro changes. And I kind of talk about that in the book, that actually macro changes is what everyone thinks the book's about. So they're all like, oh, I haven't had any big change in my life, so your book's probably not relevant to me. I've had quite a lot of people saying that. But it's actually about micro changes. Exactly that. Like, hang on a minute, if I can stop myself running back to the desk, what would my life look like? If I can grab myself in the moment of getting cross because those roadworks would be driving me crazy, and every time, this sends me on a different direction and I lose my mind, and, I get to the office and I'm all wound up and I'm cross. That's a micro change that you're just not handling very well. And you're not choosing to handle it well. You're actively just allowing it to ruin your day. So actually we all have micro changes. I call them kind of opportunities to grab something and go do it differently every single day. So having a different relationship with change could really help. And exactly that example, Paul, that you've given, just notice something and think, well, what if I experiment a little bit and do it this way? We
Yeah,
can
yeah.
never always win, but we can try, and we can kind of see, like you saw a repeat and thought, well, how can I disrupt that? So yeah, I think that's what play actually is. It's kind of like observing and going, well, hang on, what if I play with a couple of ideas that might disrupt that?
very wise words. Thank you. So we talked a bit about AI there and bringing this back to change. We know that a lot of people we talk to are worried about how AI might change their job, whether it's that job not existing or changing roles and responsibilities or having to develop their skills. What advice would you give to people who are listening who might be thinking, I'm really worried about how AI could change things here?
Some of the work has already been done for us in terms of how we do this, because we've got the change technical adapt model already out there. When we used to go through transformation tech programs, don't we know there's going to be resistors, there's going to be early adopters, there's going to be people who just kind of jump on it and run over the hill and far away, and then there's people who are going to, I think that model called them laggards. That's probably changed
Yeah,
now, but
yeah.
the fully fledged laggard, probably I am in AI, like resist at all parts, completely, pretend it's not happening, all of that good stuff. It's fine. So all of that's fine, but the work is acknowledging it and going, "Look, this is what's happening." Because AI is one of those things that it's out there now. We can't stop it. It's gonna be what it'll be, but we also have to put it in the context of, it's still just one element of life. It's actually humans that are choosing what to do with it. We have to keep reminding ourselves of that. And I think that's sometimes missing, that people think AI is gonna take my job. No, a human is gonna decide that your job can be done differently, and that's something to kind of be more aware of. Listen to conversations. So AI is not going to take your job. The human is going to decide that your job can be done differently. So what you need to do in that space is understand that thinking and understand, well, where do I now take my talents? Worrying, there's kind of two parts of worry. Worry is sometimes worthless worry, where we're just spending a lot of energy in things that we can't control, what ifs, the mights, this might happen, that might happen. It's worthless. It's using our energy in the wrong way. But there's also worth it worry, which is where actually we do need to think about these things. So don't just dismiss if you're worried kind of like it's all bad energy. Some of it'll be bad, some of it'll be good. Try and find like the good worth it worry, where you're kind of like, yeah, I do need to think about this. What happens if the stuff that I do, like I'm a writer, I'm corporate comms really, and go into organizations when change is going through and write comms for it. Can that be done by AI? Maybe, although from what I've seen, probably not. At the moment, AI is pretty bad actually at this stuff. Um, but it will change how I do what I do. I'll now become maybe the editor. So rather than me controlling everything, maybe I will edit the comms and actually structure it and give it the human side. So actually, I need to dial that up and let go of some of the parts that AI can do. But I need to kind of create some time to think about that through my lens and really understand it. So I would say to people, don't just dismiss your worry. There'll be good worry that'll be helping you to get in a good position, but there'll also be a lot of worthless energy about worry, 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 but you're not really acting on it. You're not getting curious. You're not stopping and thinking. You're not getting messy with, oh, I might have to change who I am. You're not getting into the play space. And that's the problem. That's the very problem. If we're just sitting in worry and we're not moving into stopping and thinking about it, then life will come at us rather than us having a bit more agency.
That's such good advice. Thank you. And I think you're right. It's so easy with AI to get into this headspace of the Terminator's going to be sat at my desk and everything else, rather than actually there's an opportunity for me here, which is about developing my skills and thinking about what value I can offer and also how I use these tools. So it's getting people into the mindset of using their agency, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. We've got to remind ourselves as humans as well. It's not really in anyone's interest for everybody to be unemployed. I mean, we might go, if you listen to Mo Gardot's conversation with Stephen Bartlett recently on his podcast, it was quite
Oh,
terrifying.
God.
Oh, yes.
It's awful.
2027.
Yeah,
It was a
doom and
really
gloom.
terrifying conversation, probably done very deliberately to get people to think better about it, I think.
Mm.
But when you really think about it, it's going to be in nobody's interest for everybody to be unemployed, because even the people creating stuff with AI, if no one's buying it, it's pointless. You're going to be struggling as well. So the economy, the world economy, doesn't work on everybody being unemployed. So you have to remember that humans will buy from humans. We might become just a little bit more conscious of where we're buying, for example, what we're doing. Maybe we have to think more about this stuff. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of change, but we have to own change, not just allow it to be done for us, and not just think that somebody else is thinking this through, because they probably aren't.
It might be easy for us to say, or certainly easy for me to say, because the point that I'll always come back to is the same point that I made all those years ago with social media, that you've got to balance the stuff that you know that you probably shouldn't do with AI with curiosity and going out and trying it. And I know that's harder for some than others. I get that. But unless you're going out there and playing with the tools and having that sort of experimentation and showing that curiosity, it's always going to be the sort of the monster over the hill, isn't it? It's going to be the thing that you can't quite get a grip on because you've not experienced it yourselves. And I'll give you an example. In recent weeks, a whole bunch of people at Grant Thornton got made redundant, and they were all of the EAs and PAs. And a lot of that stuff is going to be outsourced, but a lot of that stuff, they will be looking at AI and the tools that they have internally to be able to replace some of that. Now, the knock-on effect of that is a big firm doing that means that every other EA and PA in every other smaller firm across the UK is going to be thinking, it's me next. And that's why I think it always comes back to communication and equipping leaders to have better conversations with employees about AI coming from a space of understanding and experimentation rather than a sort of yes, this is going to come and it's going to take away your job, which is the sort of the monster in the room, I guess.
Yeah, until in a few years' time that they realize, oh, I didn't realize what the VA did and the EA did, and actually, there's no way on earth that an AI thing can do that.
Mm.
And that's the other thing. We know, forget AI, there's always been bad decisions when it comes to restructuring organizations because unfortunately, leaders don't always, unfortunately, see the whole picture. And they've always made bad decisions in that space based on maybe short-term gains. The
Mm.
shareholders want to see something back to them quickly, so they make bad decisions. And then what happens is in a couple of years' time, they kind of bring everyone back because they kind of go, oh, we did need
We
this.
were
We
wrong.
did need that. So I think that the key for it is with everybody feeling in this space is that we know how to do change. We've always known how to do change. It's just maybe coming at us at a different pace, but always just kind of work on, well, where's my agency in this? What can I adapt to? Am I observing what's around me? Am I playing with different ideas about myself? Because again, you see kind of people going, well, this is just me and this is how I am and I'm not wanted anymore. But it isn't just you. That's just a belief. You can be many different things if you open up a little bit. So yeah, I think at an individual level, know that humans are worth something. And if you've had a job in a corporate, you're going to have some sort of skill set that's going to be worth something to somebody. So yeah, you have to keep focused on that.
Yeah. And a note to accountants that if you want to get hold of an accountant, the only person that knows where they are at any one time is their EA or PA. So,
Correct.
you know,
AI does not know that.
yeah,
AI could
good luck
could
with
not
that.
do that yet. Yet.
And
So
would you want them to? That's more important. We've got to keep reminding ourselves we've got choice. I'm not going to be working with a lot of companies, or buying from a lot of companies, should I say, that are just all robotic. Like, you can
Mm,
choose. You can say, no, I'm not. I want to. It's the same with, do you remember when all the call centers got outsourced all those years
mm.
ago?
oh,
Or not even outsourced. They just kind of disappeared and it all became automated. What happened was, in some organizations saw this as a opportunity. Like, oh, we're gonna be the people who you get an actual human to answer the phone. And, they're still doing well.
I loved your piece in the book about change monsters and how people respond to change. And it felt like there was a lot of read across with the work that Paul and I do going into organizations, working with them on digital and AI transformations, where you will see those very individual and also collective examples of people resisting or responding to change in certain ways. Could you tell our listeners a bit about what change monsters are and where they might see examples of such behaviour in their workplaces and how to deal with that as well?
There's just these moments that these things come at us. Like, we actually sometimes feel like everything's going well. Like, we get an idea, we get energy from it. And we think, yeah, this is exciting. And then round the corner, this thing just comes and kind of roars at us. Hence, it's a monster. It's kind of like this thing that comes and scares us into either freezing, stopping, having a different reaction. So that's kind of like where that thought came from. Not so much that it's like the self-doubt or imposter. It's not so much that. It's more that actually you could be taking action. You could be in flow. You could be doing work and suddenly something comes at you and you think, whoa, and it wobbles you a little bit. And I looked at the work that we've always referred to in change, which, like Kotter's four things, for example, where, you get the resistors, you get the kind of people who um, kind of agree, but go along with it, but don't agree with what's going on in change, or you get the people who are kind of actually just operating from misinformation. So we kind of have that already. But I wanted to write something about our personal ownership of it, for us to catch it ourselves and actually own it a little bit. So that's what the sort of monster's about. And I think I just surfaced a few, I think there was only 5 in the end, a few things that I saw coming up, like regret, for example. Regret comes up really heavily at that moment when you're actually deciding you're going to work through and you've maybe got some ideas of how you're going to do it and own it. Regret comes up or regret keeps you frozen because you think, yeah, but what if I make the wrong decision? Or what if this goes wrong? It's actually a form of regret and you have a different relationship with it. So that's why I put that in there. And then things like procrastination, where you're just deliberately sort of avoiding, but even that can give you like little insights into, but why? What's going on? Why am I putting this off? Why have I suddenly started to feel negative? So, yeah, when the monsters come along, it's not so much that we are at the mercy of them, but they are kind of like a sign for us to explore further. Like to go, oh, okay, I'm feeling resistant. Why? So rather than dismiss it and again, in the organizational setting, what I observe is sometimes people who the monsters visiting them, we observe them as kind of just being annoying, disruptive. Oh God, if he's not playing the game, you're either on the bus or you're not on the bus. We kind of get that thrown at us. But if we observe it through a bit more curiosity and go, yeah, but why is there resistance? Maybe there's hesitation for a very good reason. Maybe there's concern that needs to be heard. Suddenly there's a different conversation in that part. So yeah, I think that's kind of what I was trying to get at with the gremlins, the monsters that come at us, that not to dismiss them, not to think it's wrong, but to think, oh, this might be something that we need to explore and investigate in this moment, because there could be some real interesting insights.
I really love that because there's a couple of organisations we've worked with where we were trying to get them to really buy into some quite significant digital and AI changes. And there was a bit of pushback. And I just had this sixth sense that it wasn't just about what we were trying to do. And then lo and behold, from further conversation with both of you, discovered there's some quite big things going on in the organization that will well beyond the scope of digital and AI. So I really love what you said there, because there's something about having sufficient distance from the change so that you can look at it in the round. And also there's something about taking the shame out of the situation as well, isn't there? Because we all give ourselves a really hard time with change, don't we? We expect to fix it overnight or do it perfectly, or certainly that's how I always look at it when I know I need to make a change or I'm experiencing change. And you're so generous about how people need to look after themselves, Eleanor, and I think that's beautiful. We all need to be more kind to ourselves, don't we?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that there's that element of it, but there's also that real harsh productivity element of it as well. There's 2 elements of that, isn't there? Like what you've just said, Zoe, is so important for us not to dismiss it as just, oh, it's just the kind stuff. I ain't got time for that. Again, I've had that before when running projects.
Mm.
If you dismiss everybody that's resisting or you stop listening, you're going to miss some real crucial input. And I could guarantee that some of these projects will go wrong because we didn't listen. And so that's sort of it's probably very subtle in the book because this is more, my book is written for reader. It's provoking a readership thinking, but in the broader sense of a corporate approach to it, the monster comes along. We don't run away from it. We don't just kill it and that's the end of it. That's not what it is. It's getting curious about why is it shown up? What is it? Is it bringing a gift? Do we need to hear something? Like, it's a really weird thing, but that's what I want it to be. Like, why are you here? What do you want? And that's more what I see getting. It just doesn't sometimes exist in the transformation program. We just think they're annoying, especially in the work I do because I'm comms. I'll get brought into a meeting. It'll be like, nobody's listening. Everyone's arguing. Nobody's taking action. More comms, more comms. Use capital letters in the email. And it's like, oh my God, what are we doing here? No, maybe they've got a point. Maybe there's something else that's wrong with this. So yeah, that's what that's about.
This has been so wise and thought-provoking, Eleanor. Thank you so much. This was a brilliant conversation, and it's been the perfect discussion to have on a Friday afternoon at the end of a really busy week. And it's really made me reflect on how I have dealt with change previously. So thank you so much for sharing your wise words and, of course, your amazing book with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank
You are
you.
very welcome, and we can't wait to share this with our listeners.
Many thanks to Eleanor for joining us on the podcast. I really enjoyed our discussion and found it really refreshing. And the book is well worth a read. Paul, have you finished the book now?
I am still waiting. I'm ready to jump in again. And I am joining Eleanor for a read along that she's doing. She's doing different chapters of the book over several nights. So we'll include the links to those read throughs in the show notes. And I'm really looking forward to catching up and finishing her wonderful book. As always, we really do appreciate that you've listened all the way to the end of the episode. You can support our podcast by leaving us a 5-star review wherever you listen to us. It really does help us to reach more people. So if you've enjoyed what you've heard, do share us with a friend.
Thank you so much for listening today, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks with a brand new episode of Starts at the Top.
See you then, and bye for now.
See you next time.